Welcome to this very special bank holiday episode of Menopause Conversations. I'm really delighted to have my next guest on. It's Sunday morning, it's just after 9, and it's a wonderful opportunity to talk about all things testosterone with the amazing Dr. Zoe Hodson. Hi Zoe, how are you?
Hello, lovely to be here.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much.
I won't say it's sunny, but it's not raining in Manchester.
Oh, well, it's raining in Devon, but never mind.
Oh, no.
It's going to be raining all day, but never mind. The sun is shining here. We've got our bright colours on.
Yes.
So the reason I wanted to do this, this is the day before that documentary, that second part documentary that's coming out, which no doubt we'll talk about a lot of things. It's the Davina documentary, and Zoe is actually someone who's contributed to that second documentary. So Zoe, it's lovely to have you here. Tell us a little bit about you. We know that you're a GP specialist. You've got a special interest in menopause. How is it that you found yourself involved with a documentary that talks about testosterone? Where did your journey start?
It's been just it's been a bizarre couple of years. So I've been a GP for over 20 years and GP trainer. So we were quite a big training practice. So I had lots of trainees as well. And so at the very beginning, I was utterly hopeless at menopause care because, like many others, I'd never been taught. So absolutely dreadful, wouldn't have spotted it in a million years, very anxious around HRT, all of the things that you hear time and time again.
Okay.
And then, so I was doing the family planning clinic, and there was just this niggly feeling that I was pretty good at that, I would say. And then the next stage, hopeless. And it just felt all very wrong. And then I think it's probably about 5 years ago and I would say it's Louise Newson has really she's changed it globally, I would say. So the writing that started to come through wasn't all this doom, gloom and everything else. It was actually, this could be a good thing, replacing your own hormones. And the sort of products had changed, and this body identical HRT was on the radar. And so I started to, I would say possibly slightly obsessively, read up around it. And then I just thought, this just ticks all of my boxes, because I've always had a thing for women's health, and then always had a thing for people who aren't being heard and people who are being dismissed. And I suppose it's that whole tale as old of time of hysteria, when people are being fobbed off with diagnoses and you just think, really? I'm not convinced that that's going on. So carried on. And then I went down to just sit in Louise's clinic for a day, and we got chatting, really hit it off. And at that time, general practice, I was falling out of love with it a little.
Okay.
And then she asked if I would like to go and work under the Newson Health umbrella. So did that, which was incredible. And then, so I've had a couple of years there. And then because of so I would like to get back to face-to-face. So I've moved away from there and I'm set up on my own. So hopefully once we get past all the red tape, so I'm doing video consultations again now, but we're pretty close to be able to do face-to-face. So that is a private clinic, but I do part-time, and then there's what I do is pick up and hopefully help with local projects that interest me alongside. So there's still some time left for those. We've got a really exciting one at the moment with some refugee women in Manchester, fantastic woman called Magdalene from Africats. So we're putting together some small menopause workshops with sort of various groups of women. We've got interpreters, and then we're hoping to put together a lovely day for them. So things like that, there's still going to be time for. And then obviously the testosterone crusade continues.
Oh yes, definitely. And it's lovely because you know, we talked before we started recording about, you know, the stereotypes that can exist within our healthcare system. And I think you're somebody who, you bust a lot of those stereotypes. You're very open. You say it how it is. You use great metaphors. I've pinched your three-legged stool, I can't tell you how many times. And I first got to experience you when I'm part of the Newson Health Menopause Society, and you did a webinar there. And I remember, I mean, it was quite hot for you when you were presenting that day, weren't you? There was an irony about that. I think your radiator, wasn't it? It was just really hot in that room.
We never put the radiators on because we've got her in a wonky old Victorian house, and the insulation's non-existent. And for once, we've put them on, and they were blasting. I couldn't reach. I was thinking, can I open the window with my foot because I'm just melting here? And I thought, it just looks as though I'm just gradually
drowning in sweat. It was really brilliant, but it just had me absolutely gripped. And as you say, you know, there's such a lot of great information from you know, Newson Health, and in terms of what they're putting on their socials, it's really fantastic. But you've affectionately been given the name the testosterone queen, which I love because it's the antithesis of what most people think testosterone is about. They think it's the testosterone king, you know, it's a man's hormone. So let's get into a little bit of what's the deal with testosterone when it comes to menopause, and, you know, tell us a bit about that passion that comes behind it for you. What's it all about?
Well, it started off again in general practice. It was probably about 7 years before I left, and somebody who was in their HR team came into me and she said, I think that testosterone is the missing piece for me. And I just felt really quite cross with her, because I just thought, why are you asking me? I've never prescribed this as a GP. I've never been taught about this as a GP. The only time I've ever come across it is when people have been sent to a tertiary centre, not even secondary care, a specialist hospital, and they've waited for ages, and I'm not quite sure why they've had it, and some people and the rest of everybody else hasn't had it. So why on earth would you put me in this really uncomfortable position? And it was only fast forward and started my menopause training and started to prescribe it. And again, so the guidelines just talk about sex drive. And then what I noticed over and over and over and over again was that things like brain fog were lifting, that cognitive, the cognitive sharpness. And this is the bit that really interests me. There's hardly any data out there. It's so frustrating. Things like energy, things like strength. So we had so many people that said, I'm going to the gym or I'm doing these classes, and my trainer is just absolutely flummoxed and doesn't know why I'm not getting stronger when I'm putting all of this work in. And again, I have, and there's probably no data about this, other things that seem to have improved. There's something called autonomic dysfunction, so this sort of woo, dizzy head, blood pressure dropping, that seems to improve with it. There's a condition called POTS, which is, and you just think, is there a link with that? But everywhere you turn, oh, we haven't got any funding for research. And you just think this is crazy, because you just see all of these people that have been either going to leave work because their brains have gone. And it was that sort of ironic thing that whilst I was reading up on all of this, my testosterone I had my testosterone checked and it was really low. And I had to have time off work, and I'd never had time off work in 20 years, but I couldn't process. It just felt like there was it felt like somebody had shoved cotton wool down the middle of my brain. So data things, I just could not. It was such an effort to process them. And the energy, again, because somebody termed it an insidious creep, which I think it is. And so I knew it was. I'd started on some testosterone, but I was still absolutely terrified. I thought, this cannot just be testosterone. This is, I don't do ill. I've never been ill. What on earth is this? Just literally lying in bed with a fried brain, not being able to sleep, going, this is horrendous. And I think there was a big, and we'll come on to that, I think there was a big dollop of burnout at the same time, which didn't help. But it's that, and So I started looking at, because again, it shouldn't be, this should be, in my view, for people that need it, it should be a standard part of treatment. And so started looking at so in each area, there is so in England, it's called the Clinical Commissioning Group, and they sort of advise on medications, more unusual medications that can or can't be prescribed in the area. And so it's a year last February, I thought, let's just have a little look at what's happening across England and, well, across the UK. It's slightly different, the health boards in Wales, so slightly different in each country. And I was looking, and the websites are nigh on impossible to navigate anyway. And you're looking and you're thinking, well, it's not mentioned, and it's not mentioned. And oh, look, it's mentioned there, but it says it's deemed unimportant. And it was this sort of, right, we're 2021. And so the only way that people can access this is to either pay privately or, I don't know, or fight and battle and try to get hold of it through the NHS services. And again, it's, once you've prescribed it, it's very easy. There's some monitoring, but GPs are incredibly capable and do lots and lots of far more complex prescribing. So it's that thing that, right, okay, even if it's happening in secondary care, there's no reason why this shouldn't then go back to general practice with some monitoring. But as a GP, the first thing I did when I was asked to prescribe it was look at the formulary. Well, it wasn't there, so therefore it's not in my designated to be in my realm. So this is where it sort of started from. And we did approach, I can't remember the name of the body now. There is something where you can change things nationally, but I was told that this didn't happen very often, and it was more likely we'd have to approach the individual. Now, I think at that time there were over 144, so it's a bit of a task, but we just thought, well, we may as well start somewhere. So that's where we started, and it's doing really well, particularly as we were asking people in the middle of a pandemic if they could change their formulary pathways, which wasn't the right time to be doing this, but I just thought, if we don't do it now, it's never going to happen.
Well, exactly. And now we know that the clinical governance groups that you talk about are becoming these integrated care systems, aren't they? Yeah. These ICSs, and you put out a brilliant. You did an Instagram live with the amazing Diane Dancerbrink, one of the original Grassroots campaigners for menopause, last week, which I found fascinating. And there's a template letter there for people to send to their clinical governance groups. First of all, and I'll put the website links, but you can actually see if your local CCG will prescribe testosterone. It's got a colour coding. I live in Devon. There isn't one there, but that's about to change because we've got amazing people working on that.
Yes.
Two ladies, Ginty and Lou, who have a Womankind podcast, the Womankind Collective, and it just shows that with, I know celebrities doing a lot of things, but we've got very communal garden people who are being assertive, who are writing letters. 173,000 people have signed the Make Menopause Matter campaign. That is what has been the outcry that has caused this ripple effect into government, isn't it?
Well, this is, because I couldn't have done this on my own, and it's been such a collective effort, because people have taken that template letter so I didn't write that, it was this other brilliant one that wrote that, and taken that and adjusted it and sent it. And then we've had pharmacists and consultants and menopause specialists in their areas. So I was actually contacted by one yesterday down in London. So we're going to see if we can try and chivvy that area along. Because again, I can see why, if they were getting letters from me 200 miles away working in a private clinic saying, can you change your formulary? Like, why should we listen to you? So a lot did, which was very kind of them. But it's that local and trying to find somebody, and it's a lot of effort to change, but it's happened. It's been absolutely brilliant. And I think the ripple effect is happening. So in Wales, for example, in areas of Wales, the first response was, this isn't a priority at the moment. And then when I emailed back again, then they said, we've had so many people asking us and contacting us about this that we're going to take it to the panel. And I think that's the thing. It's if we can start joining up the patches where you can go, well, look, so in your area, you can say, well, Somerset has it, Cornwall has it. So how come we're left in the middle? And that, I think, is starting to help.
It's this postcode lottery thing, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe when we're buying houses in future, we should just be checking out, is there a local menopause clinic and what's the formulary stating, you know, whereas before we used to worry about what the local school policy was, you know, we should be checking out that sort of thing, but we shouldn't have to do that. And you're absolutely right. And so before we talk about the complexities for GPs, we talk about the HRT shortages, let's talk about what on earth is it that I'm going to show my tube. And I'll show it this way round, so there's no branding. But this is my lovely tube from Western Australia.
And this is my crappy sachet.
Right. So let's talk about that then, shall we? Because this, I just know I need to put a pea-sized amount. I'm so used to knowing what the amount is now. I just put a pea-sized amount of that on my thigh. I'm actually quite sensitive to testosterone, so I don't take it every day, but I take it twice a week. And also, just a little hashtag for people is you can make your own testosterone if you lift weights, if you do weight bearing exercise, but you'd have to do quite a lot of that to make adequate amounts of testosterone. So this is really helpful. So let's talk about that then in a second, but tell us, what is the magic behind this? We know, yes, it improves cognitive function. You know, why is it that we don't talk about this? It's all estrogen, estrogen, estrogen in the news. Why is it we don't recognize as much the symptoms of deficient testosterone?
I think it just goes back to again, historically, it's testosterone is a male hormone and estrogen is a female hormone, and we know that that's just not true. So again, men have estrogen in smaller amounts, females have testosterone in smaller amounts. And I think, Lauren Redfern did a really good podcast on the News and Health website. And again, when you look at the qualities that are associated with testosterone, it's that shift again, isn't it? So it's that strength and that, I won't say power, but that strength and the energy. And historically, females were supposed to be quiet and demure and passive, and testosterone's loosely associated with aggression and strength and hair. And so it's just lost its way completely as to what it actually does. So we have testosterone receptors throughout our bodies. We have testosterone. And again, it's one of my favorite facts is the thing that we produce 3 to 4 times more testosterone than estrogen from the ovaries premenopausally. So of course, if you're having, especially sort of if you're going into premature ovarian insufficiency, young menopause, if you're going into surgical menopause, because it's roughly a 50-50 split from the adrenal glands and the ovaries. So if anything is happening to your ovaries, then it's crashing. And then naturally, so some people will continue to run an adequate testosterone and don't need it. Same with all of the hormones. We need to just be looking at them, what's needed, rather than going. And again, I wish it wasn't called HRT, because that's got its own connotations. And you look at, going slightly off piece now, but you look at things like polycystic ovarian syndrome, and very often that is managed with the contraceptive pill. Metabolically, you just think, what? It would be far more sensible, because there's an issue with progesterone there, so it would be far more sensible to manage it with cyclical natural progesterone. But it's all got this narrow view that this is HRT and it can only be given for perimenopause and menopause. And we need to just start looking at the hormones themselves, I think.
And that's so true. I had one of my clients come to me and who has had endometriosis historically. When you are premenopausal, the hormone they give you to tackle endometriosis is progesterone, right? But now that we know, my sister had advanced surgery to remove endometriosis. She had to have a stoma partially. The reality is endometrial tissue travels. So it doesn't just stay in your uterus. So saying to hysterectomized women, oh, okay, we'll just put you on estrogen. I think we're going to start to see some research. It's starting to come in America where they're actually saying, no, you need to have all women who had endometriosis on low dose of progesterone, because those tissue cells could be still active and they migrate everywhere into your lungs, you know, your bowel, your lower back, anywhere it can be. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think it's about, HRT is not a magic bullet, you know, unless we control some of the other microcosms, the microsystems like stress, you know, sleep, relaxation, you know, it's never going to work as effectively. And that's what I always sensitize people to, which is we've got to control the controllables first of all. And this probably leads quite nicely on then to talk about stress for menopauses, and that's all stages: perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. But also let's talk about the stress that's on our general practitioners, because I think for a lot of people, we'll start with that, maybe a lot of people thinking, well, hang on a minute, I can't even get an appointment at my doctor's, so what's keeping them so busy? You gave a really nice insight to me earlier about burnout for GPs. More GPs are leaving general practice than at any other time post-war. We're struggling to get people into this profession. So what's going on? What is keeping GPs busy, and what's contributing to their mental health right now?
I mean, I noticed in the last sort of 5 years, I would say, of my practice, that it's always been hard work. It was hard work, but an incredibly satisfying job. And then it just, I mean, this is why I took up knitting, because it started to creep in that you'd just be running over cases, and you'd be running over cases, and you'd wake up at 2 and these cases would be in, have I done this? Have I missed this? Have I done this? Because it got shorter and shorter and shorter. And even so in my practice, a lot of the conditions that were pretty much managed in hospital when I started as a GP trainee, quite rightly moved into general practice, because GPs are very capable of managing them, and it stopped people having to travel backwards and forwards to hospital appointments. But the funding didn't follow, the GP numbers, the GP time didn't follow that. And that happened over and over and over again. And we know things like the social care system, the mental health system, all under huge pressure, and services cut, which means that GPs are taking more and more and more and more. And it got to the point where I ended up, and then the access thing, so it was designated that you had to offer a certain amount of access on the day. Now, what happened with that is people that struggled, so we had lots and lots of people that didn't have internet access, didn't have mobile phones, couldn't read or write. And what happened with that access thing is that we saw a lot of people, time and time again, I'd see people where they'd say, oh, I've had a cough today. And you think, and that takes up an appointment, even though you're trying to say, well, you could have seen your pharmacist, you could have you could have just seen how this had gone, and maybe you didn't need an appointment. That takes an appointment away from somebody who might be older, who needs their diabetes monitoring, who needs their blood pressure checking. And so you're putting systems in place to make sure that you've caught up with them. Again, things like end-of-life care are really complex, and we did a lot of, in our practice, we did a lot of work, and it showed that people wanted to be at home. But again, that's pretty intense. So it's often daily visiting. So that's another thing that comes in, and another thing that comes in. And then with the pandemic, they were told, well, no, you can't see anyone face to face. You have to manage this all over the phone. So that means that all of the what's called chronic disease monitoring got shifted out, and there's even more access, because the email thing, there really is no filter. So you get lots of people thinking, oh, I've just noticed this, I'll just pop the GP an email. And again, it hasn't quite bedded in, I don't think, because I'm working at a GP practice at the moment and doing my videos from there, so I can see what's going on. And they're missing the face-to-face contact. But it's not being very structured, the guidance as to when that can come back in, because obviously you don't want people sitting in a hot waiting room. It's still an absolute, you don't want to go to GPs and come out with COVID. And then they've still got to catch up with all this backlog of work. The hospitals are still under enormous strain. And then we have an HRT shortage.
Yeah.
And your GPs don't know what the pharmacists have got in stock. And it's backwards and forwards. And some practices will have a pharmacist, but that's taking up huge amounts of their time, ringing around the different pharmacies close to them and saying, what have you got today? Oh, I've got 1 box of Everol and I've got 20 sachets of Sandrina. Can you hold them? Can you hold them? And we'll do. And then we've got to ring this woman and say, oh, you can go and have this ration of, it's chaos.
It's chaos. That was my cat that just walked in, if you saw that door open. Yeah, because I've got my knitting bag here. You can guess what the cat's doing, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened to me yesterday. But the only difference was my pharmacy said, we can't be ringing you back to tell you when it comes into stock. And I just went, oh my, and I said, no, I totally get it. I said, but no one's winning here.
No,
the GP's not winning, pharmacist isn't winning, and certainly the patient isn't winning.
No.
I and like you said, I hadn't appreciated, you have to fill out a lot of forms for people who are either illiterate, find the forms too complex, you're doing that as well. And I think that's a really important thing to sensitize people to, because I think it'd be very, very easy. You only know what you know, and people come back to how they're experiencing the NHS, and it'd be very easy for people to say, well, what are the doctors doing? I think when you put it like that, it makes common sense to me that a lot of people would go, do you know what, it's not for me, it's not what I signed up for. And I think that is a shame. So we need to be respectful. Our GPs are doing the best that they can in the main. They're doing as much as they can. But actually, how do we tackle this HRT shortage thing, in your view? I mean, I know we've got a Tsarina. I refuse to call it a Tsar. We've got a Tsarina, and that's great, but that doesn't help people like myself today, does it? So what's this all about, really, in your
opinion? I think it's
again,
so it's just been absolutely farcical. I mean, the demand has been gradually increasing. It hasn't been an overnight thing. So I honestly don't know. I mean, we've all written to the Department of Health. I found some legislation there that said that if something is short, then they should be having meetings with the drug companies every fortnight to ask them to reroute stock from other countries. Well, that clearly hasn't happened. You ring the drug companies and they go, oh no, it'll be here in 2 weeks, it'll be here in 2 weeks. Well, that's been happening since January. So sort of, well, you keep saying that it's coming into the country. Well, where's it going? Because we're not seeing any sign of it. So I'm hoping that the Tsarina we just need this not to happen again. I saw Diane's video about it. She was on the news in 2019 talking about exactly the same thing. And I know so things like Brexit have impacted other medications, and it wasn't an unusual thing. So every day there was a shortage of some medication in GP land, whether it was eczema creams or blood pressure tablets, but it wasn't all of them, because we've only got a pretty small array to go through. We've got patches, some gels and spray. 5 sort of probably main products, not many. And we shouldn't, and I think this is the thing that hasn't come across. You can't, yes, people are having to change preparations, and there are lots and lots of tables out there because again, the formulary that GPs use is really hard to navigate for HRT. I wouldn't use it. So there are tables out there. There's some on the British Menopause Society website to do conversions, but you've never been taught about HRT, which is it's just appalling in it. That's obviously one of Diane's aims. So you're trying to work out what 2 pumps of estrogel equates to in a patch, having never been taught it. You go to the book and it doesn't really make sense. You don't even know whether those patches are in the pharmacy. So you're having to ring and go, what have you got? And we'll try and put some sort of regime together. So short term, I think it's still better to try and swap to something else than come off it, because there are sort of implications with that in itself. But it often takes, and coming back to that, I mean, again, it often takes, I would say, 4 or 5 tweaks before you get the regime that's right for you at that stage. And it's a moving target because your needs will change. So to just go, oh, we'll just go and change it. it's not as easy as that.
It's not as easy as that. And that's what I said to my pharmacist yesterday. She said, we'll just put you on a tablet. I said, you won't put me on a tablet. I said, because that does not agree with me. You know, I'm on the gels for a reason. I mean, I think the pharmaceutical industry needs to wake up. We should have more than 5 providers. You know, Besson's Healthcare actually makes Sandrina gel, but it also makes Utrogestan. That to me is a little bit of a monopoly on the market, you know. We need to do it differently. We need to get more players coming into that market. That then drives the competition. It drives the stock availability. You know, how many products are there for cardiovascular disease? Everyone's in on that market. You know, so the reality is women's health has been downplayed for generations, hasn't it? By business, by pharmaceutical industry. So naturally, the healthcare system will not place that much importance on us. So there's multiple wheels here that need tweaking, and you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I've also got a problem with when we talk about this free HRT, that, or well, not free, but reduced cost HRT we're due to get next year, which should have got this year. That in itself is a complex system, because it can take a woman, like, as you say, months to get stabilized. Then the goalposts move. She might need a tweak. You don't want to be saddled with a year's supply of HRT
that you can't take back to the pharmacy
now. You know, that's a massive waste. It's a massive burden. How do we dispose of that stuff? We don't want it going into the toilets and watercourse systems. There's enough hormones going in there. So environmentally, it's not great. So I think it's not as easy as people may think. We need to, if we're going to do it properly, let's do it properly. And
you'd have to do it on a similar thing to the prepayment thing, wouldn't you? Where you could, this would guarantee you, but it would mean, it doesn't mean that you get 12 months worth of one regime.
Exactly.
It means that HRT is covered for 12 months.
Exactly. And that it's also going to cover more products. I currently take 5 products. So that's 5 separate items on my prescription. So are you going to cover me for all 5? But we do have some good news with this coming, don't we? In that there is, I've heard Louise Newson talk about, and she's working closely with Department of Health and government in terms of actually getting testosterone, but it's looking likely that we're going to get a female testosterone next year, isn't it?
Right, I'll stop you there.
Okay.
Saying as female testosterone.
Okay, so just testosterone. Okay.
Yes.
So, and the fact that it's in a pushy pink packet doesn't mean it's any different to what's in your foil pack. So that's really important, because we are told that this is why you can't get it.
It's
for female
use. Yeah.
And you don't have to have just low libido to be using this, although that's what the NHS currently tells us.
So this is another, and I'm hoping, hopefully there are going to be, I mean, I would hope once Androfem gets licensed, then that opens the gateway for other preparations to become licensed and to go into, I mean, people are, as I say, I wrote about this the other day, people are putting it in little bottles and dispensing it and doing all sorts of things, which we shouldn't have to do. Yes, you can do it to make it easier, but we shouldn't have to.
No.
It should be in a something that dispenses a metered dose. I muddle through with that, and it's fine. But again, I quite like a preparation that does 1/10 of a sachet each day, rather than me having to navigate that. And the same thing with the little tubes. So hopefully, once there is a licensed metered dose in the right range for female use, then that will mean, because again, I have a feeling that you're not going to be able to do research projects with 1/10 of a sachet of a male preparation. So hopefully that will then start to drive the research, because I just think it's so unexplored. I mean, even on the leaflet, so the drug information leaflet for this one, it says, if you're on diabetic medication, monitor your sugars carefully because they may drop. And you just think, well, why isn't this being looked into for insulin resistance?
Exactly. And they're really,
why do females get more autoimmune disease than males? Why do females get more irritable bowel? Why do females get diagnosed with fibromyalgia more frequently? What could be missing? And you just think, why is no one interested and excited about this?
And you know, in my training as a menopause coach, one of the things that fascinated me most was the pregnenolone steal, as we call it, because we know if we've got enough testosterone, that can be converted to estrogen. So we can get our own estrogen if we've got we don't want to drive it all down this pathway, but if we did need to have more estrogen, it can come if we've got an abundance of testosterone. So the reality is, we shouldn't have to choose between the hormones, but if we did have to choose one, this has got to be the fundamental one, because it's making another one as a byproduct also, is it? If we were forced down that road, not that I would want that, but I think people think that this is an add-on. This is, and we've got to change that mindset, haven't we? That it's not like, oh, when you fancy a little bit more, or, like the Ann Summers parties that some people have sort of said, oh yeah, throw in a bit of testosterone for a bit of oomph.
No, it doesn't work like that, does it?
It's so much more than that, isn't it?
And I think you're absolutely, I mean, if we come back to that stress thing again, it's a massive, massive issue at this time of life, because it completely, and I absolutely agree with you that HRT does not suddenly fix things if there are underlying pathways. So I always say this is your stock take time. And this is when all of those habits that have crept in to deal with the insane level of stress that is out there. So I see so many people where the 7 o'clock wine has snuck in, just because of sort of, I'm feeling so, the coffee is in there, the nutrition has gone down, I haven't got time to exercise. And if you're putting HRT into that swamp, it's not going to go down the pathways in as clean a way as if all of those other systems are supported. So it isn't just about HRT, it's about, but very often it starts to act as a base layer to give you just that little bit more oomph and resilience to then go, right, okay, feeling a little bit better because my sleep is back on track. So what can I start looking at doing? Massive thing with, again, one of the menopause psychologists and I chatted about this. There seems to be this wonderful clarity when your estrogen drops. And even when you replace it, you still start seeing all of the things that you've put up with for years and years and years that weren't put up with. So that's that rage thing, which again, I think feels very uncomfortable to lots of people. And it's observing and connecting. And it's just, what does my body need at this time, which usually completely goes against what society is telling us we have to do, and we have to be on it, and we have to be performing all of the time, and we can't possibly ever rest because rest is lazy. So this is why it's so interesting. It's a real sort of sea change and a kickback. And I think this is why we've got so many different voices now, which is brilliant. Just saying, right, okay, enough's enough. We're taking this seriously. This is a big time of life. Absolutely.
And it's that whole connecting the dots. When I talk in industry, I talk to corporate organisations, raising awareness, I talk about joining the dots, because the dots, it is literally like a dot-to-dot puzzle. But unless you connect them up and then go, actually, do you know what? I've got 8 symptoms here, which I've had for about 9 or 10 months that I've just been putting up with. Actually, there's a relationship between all of those. And one of the things I really feel passionately about is actually, it's not about having HRT done to you. If you're going to have hormone replacement therapy, my optimal may not fit in with the norms on a formulary, or, it's about having the confidence as the patient to say, actually, no, that's too much for me, or I don't think it's enough for me. And, I'm not talking about being an alchemist yourself and tinkering around too much, but I think it is about, keeping some good notes about how you're feeling, looking at the important metrics for yourself. Is your sleep improving, as you've said, Zoe? Do you feel you can concentrate a bit more? Is your confidence rising? Do you feel less anxious? It's about just keeping a check on some of those important things for yourself that you can then determine, yes, I'm improving. I think if you just feel like you're coming out of the darkness and into the light, that can do wonders for you. So you're so right in that way. So when you think about your own journey, Zoe, through perimenopause,
car crash.
You see, even that, I mean, it's just
absolute car crash.
Are you happy to tell us anything about that and what you've learned from it? That would be really helpful for people.
It's been interesting. Now I'm sort of on the other side. So again, even though I was reading about nothing else, I knew that perimenopause, so average age of menopause in the UK 51, average length of perimenopause 7 years, so very common. 40s, 1 in 20 women will become menopausal between 40 and 45, so take perimenopause back. Knew all of this and did exactly the same thing that I see so many other people do. I remember clearly we went on holiday to Northumberland. I hated, sorry, Northumberland, you are very beautiful, but I was in such a foul mood. I couldn't bear the family being near me. The sea was wrong. The sand was wrong. I nearly ripped the farmer's head off because he had some pigs there, and I was chatting to him and he said, oh no, they don't go to market. We let them die naturally. And I was just thinking, how stupid do you think I am? I'm from Manchester, but I do know what happens on a farm. I was vile. And it was horrible because it was all sunny and lovely and should have been. And it got to the point, and this was probably the worst symptom I had, I couldn't bear physical contact. So we do stories at night time, and I was really struggling to lie next to my daughter. Oh. And it was because you're just thinking, what is wrong with me? This has always been one of my favorite things. And I'm just sort of, I can feel myself shrinking away. And then I was this is very much, do not follow this at all, because it was completely the wrong thing to do. So it was a standing joke at work. I had the odd crumpet at lunchtime and double caffeine in the afternoon, just to try and stay alert and functioning. So I'd have a coffee and a Diet Coke. So of course didn't sleep. And it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. No hot flushes. Never had hot flushes, so that's the thing. Anxiety, which I've always had a tendency to, got worse, felt a bit different. But I just thought, well, that's because I'm working hard.
Yeah.
And it just crept up and crept up and crept up. And then it just, it just crashed one day. And I think again, so I had started on some HRT towards the latter end of that. But I think because I hadn't addressed any of the other, I didn't know how to. It was that thing of, I just have to keep working. I have to keep working.
Keep going, just keep going.
Keep going, because I can't. And that is partly with the NHS. There is not a culture where you can go, actually, I'm really struggling here. Can I have, because then you think, well, you're letting everyone else down. So I can't take time off, even though I'm advising people every day to take time off for the similar symptoms. And you just think, no, you can do it, you've done it before, you can do it, and then just crash. So yeah, it's been interesting. And I think with, similarly to lots of other people, rest was not something that naturally was on my agenda. It was, well, that's not productive, so you can't do that. You can sleep, but rest, no.
And that is again with my coaching hat on, when I approach menopause with the coaching, a lot of the times it's the things we haven't dealt with before that get spotlighted through the menopause transition. If we have a high drive for perfectionism, if we have that work ethic that means that we're always at work, the blurred lines of a pandemic don't help, the work from home thing, where when is off work, when is on work, you're elongating those hours, and like you say, self-medicating, and the whole thing with caffeine, as we know, it's got a half-life of 8 hours. I mean, self-medicating with caffeine is we all do it, because you don't have that thing to go, well, what do I need right now? It's like, no, I just need to crack on, and you do what you do, and we're not judging people for that. But actually it is an opportunity, if anyone's watching this video now, it's to sit down with 5 minutes with a piece of paper and ask yourself what you want to take out of your life that is unpleasant for you. It's adding stress. When you look at your life very objectively, you think, actually, I'm not seeing my friends. That's one of the things that I noticed. I withdrew massively. I'm quite an outgoing person. I get a lot of energy from other people, and I just tucked myself away, and I stopped little things. I stopped wearing red, my favorite color. I stopped doing all things. I stopped listening to music. I stopped smiling. It's little micro things that maybe no one else would have noticed, but I noticed them. and it would be remiss of us not to talk about the impact on partners. You know, when you think of that time for you, and I'm happy to share with me, I mean, you just described my holiday to Scotland when you described your holiday to Northumberland. It was like that for me, and I just felt wretched. The guilt, you get an overwhelm of guilt as well, before the next storm makes its appearance. But let's talk about partners. What's it like for partners, and how can we do more to support them, do you think? Because it's not easy, is it?
I think it's a two-way thing, and this goes back, doesn't it? Because again, if we had the younger generation knowing about this, and knowing that, I always say, you know, that jumper that says winging it, well, it comes to a time where it's unwinging it and starting to know what's coming, and that you can't necessarily get away with sort of long hours partying. You there is still fun, but you need to start to care for yourself. I think that's the thing. And then I think with people around you, it's accepting that, again, you might not know. So for someone that's sort of held everything together, you're suddenly the one in the vulnerable position. I mean, I remember Andy, after we had quite a few chats, because it was that thing of, we ended up where he would just say, can you tell me what you need right now? And that was brilliant, because I didn't want some grand plan, and it could be anything like, I just need to be on my own, or a cup of tea. And it was just bringing it into the moment, because there was no way I couldn't tell him what I needed for the next 6 months. I haven't got a clue. But it was just that sort of, I can see you there. I acknowledge that you don't know who you are, what you are, but is there something that can I be there or not there, and not take offense?
Yes.
Because you do need a lot more time alone. And it's sort of, this does not mean that I doesn't mean that I don't love you. I just need, and I think because everything can be quite heightened, it's that need to be alone more.
And that's so true, Zoe, because what's happening in that moment is we're hijacked. So our chimp brain is like, but also people around us, their chimp brain is reacting.
What's going on?
Yeah, like what the hell's going on now? You know, what do you mean you can't cook dinner? What, I mean, I'm overemphasizing it, but it's like, what do you mean you need time on your own? And the reality is, what we need is the work done up front, which is if guys and ladies, anyone who's supporting us, can just be mindful of not choosing to be like this, not choosing to be that difficult person. Hormones fluctuate from minute to minute. We're as hijacked as you are around this whole situation. But actually, if it can be, I can be the space for you. I can run you a bath. I can sort the children out. I can actually, it makes you feel less like you're losing that person. I was talking to a couple of guys last week. I do one-to-one coaching for men around menopause and partners. So the reality is, people feel like they're losing the person that they fell in love with. They're losing that connection, and they're desperately scared. They don't want to do the wrong thing. They want to do the right thing. And so you're absolutely right. I think coming into it, which is why we do these videos, coming into it in a way that forearms you, prepares you, even if your partner isn't even perimenopausal now, it's never too early to sort of get on board, get on this bus really, and understand what's going to ultimately happen. So where are you now?
I think that's the thing at work, isn't it, as well? And I think this is why it's so important that Diane's got it on the high school curriculum, because it was really interesting. I was just doing some work, and my daughter and her friends happened to be sitting in here chatting away, and they were so they hadn't clocked what I do job wise, but they were chatting about what was happening with their mums. And it did tickle me, because I have all the different versions of the estrogel, estradose and everything else on the desk. And one of them just said, oh, my mum was really angry, and then she's gone on that stuff and she's not now. And then the other one would chip in. They hadn't.
Brilliant.
I have to say it gets worse, because I saw it wouldn't be WhatsApp there above that now, I can't remember which one it was, a conversation between them. And one of them had written, what does your mum do? Is she a vagina? I thought, right, Di, this is why we need this in high schools.
Exactly.
No, I this is not my job.
No. We've all got
like
one.
Talking about vulvas and vaginas.
Yeah.
I'm a little more than that, not on my CV as my job. So and for them as well, it's at work, it's having that radar, having those glasses on. You can clock if someone's feeling a bit wobbly. That's all you need to do, isn't it? Is kind of make you a cup of tea. It just shows it's not a great big song and dance. It's just that checking in. I can see you and I can see that you're struggling. We don't have to have a huge conversation about it if you don't want to, but I'm just letting you know that I'm here.
And that's so right. It doesn't, because people are fearful when people talk about menopause awareness, managers and leaders are like, well, I don't even want to get into that conversation because I don't know where it could go. The reality is it's not your responsibility. You don't have to be an expert, but to be supportive, we can all be supportive. It's important to all of us, when we think about our mental health, and just being that space, reaching out to someone. What can I do? I think that's really great advice, Zoe. And so when you think about where you are now then in your journey, how do you feel now about it, now that you've sort of you've traveled along this travelator of the menopause transition? How do you feel about it now, where you are now?
I think I find it absolutely fascinating. Again, the psychological aspect of it. And again, it's something that we see time and time again. I think your brain very often brings things to the fore that are unresolved. It's almost as though, no, you're moving into your wise years and you don't need to be taking this with you. So there are things that have sort of pinged back up again that I hadn't thought about for years. And I think I have some wonderful, I would say, wise women in my life. And it's been, I think, the ability to it's taken time. It's definitely taken time, and the ability to reconnect and to observe and to think, right, okay, that sort of, even at the end of a long day, we now go for we take the dog out for 3/4 of an hour, and just have that. It comes back in, and it does feel as though it's on a loop, but it is those things of being in the moment, isn't it? If I have you can get those sort of 5-minute snippets. So I will go and wind some wool because it's just soothing and repetitive and quiet. And again, it's been, one of my rages, I wrote about it, was the toilet roll middles.
Yes.
Absolutely lost it. It was sort of, how come I am the only person in this house that can take these downstairs and can sweep the floor and can clean the toilet just because I happen to have a vagina? Now that was, so obviously the entire family just sort of went, what on earth's going on there? She's lost it. But there was a truth to that.
Yes.
So once it came down, it was sort of, no, actually, you lot, you need to step up to the mark. There's a brilliant TED talk, and I can't remember who it's by, where she says, I suddenly realize, as I am chopping these sandwiches for the millionth time for the packed lunches, that there are 4 able-bodied people sitting down on the sofa. And I get so angry.
It is so true. Why does it fall to me? Why does it fall and I think there is something in that women, that vulnerability piece, we do it, we keep going, those things define us. I was ironing tea towels during my maternity leave because I felt it kept me in the game, so we don't help ourselves either in that way. But you're absolutely right, it's about asking other people to step up. And really, menopause,
there's a fear, isn't there?
There is a
vulnerability. There's a fear that they won't step up and won't care about us. So it's really,
and actually, if I give that now to you, what do I replace that with? If you're cutting the sandwiches, what am I what do I do now? So, and the reality is, if we've got children going through puberty, that's the same storm, but in reverse to coming in. I've got a 16-year-old daughter, that's coming in as we're going now. But let's mention the knitting, because you really made me giggle on Friday. I haven't laughed as much as when we talked about knitted vaginas, knitted vulvas. I don't have a knitted vagina or vulva, but I definitely found I took up knitting. but yeah, I mean, you're knitting those things, aren't you? Anatomically, we need to talk more about our vaginas, our vulvas, our clitoris, labia majora, minora, all of it. But we're even a bit like, oh my God, we've started giving it names, haven't we? Our foo-foo, my mini, we just can't call it our vagina. What is that about? And what is your motivation for actually, you do knit those models?
Well, that's started. So there's one of my lovely neighbours is putting on an exhibition about the whole menstrual journey. And so that sort of, I can't even remember what started that off. I just thought there must be a pattern out there for a vulva, and there was. And then I wanted to, because again, it's to look at representation, which is a huge other issue. So I needed a whole range of yarn. So it's actually ended up a bit bigger than I anticipated. But again, it's been really interesting because I've got two daughters. One is 14 and one is 9. And the 14-year-old will not talk about, has not been able to talk about, or won't go near. And I've tried so many different tactics talking about periods and her body and all of the other stuff. So it's been interesting because even though it's been fairly gruff snippets, we've actually managed to open up the conversation. Whereas the 9-year-old is utterly fascinated, has a fantastic teacher, and came back the other day saying, actually, mummy, it's not a vagina, it's a voluvula. And I went, okay, I think you might be vulva, but and this teacher didn't separate them, so they were all in together. She's just incredible. So it was a very no nonsense talk, and they're all intrigued and fascinated. So yeah, these vulvas have been sort of lying around the front room. They've gone off now. And then I went to a thing there's an organisation called Visible Vulvas, and I went to the most wonderful evening on Friday. So there are a couple of local, there's a pelvic floor consultant and a pathologist who's looking into precancerous cells and what causes the changes. So there's some medical specialists there. There was a wonderful woman who told her story of living with lichen sclerosis. They'd had a craft event on in the afternoon where they had, and I chatted to the woman who'd been running it, and she said there were sort of few nerves to begin with, but there were people that had been through cancer treatments there, and just having that couple of hours space to paint, they made some sort of fabric ones, so it's knowing the correct anatomy. I mean, the vast majority of people I speak to saying, do you know what your vulva looks like? Utterly clueless. And it's quite tricky to see, but you're not going to know if there are changes unless you know what it looks like. And I think thankfully, I mean, there are books out there now because they all look different. And very often one labia will be longer than the other. And it just, again, and thankfully, it's not permitted now. So probably about 7 years ago, I saw so many young women coming in saying, oh, my boyfriend says it doesn't look right, it's too dangly, it's wrong, I need surgery. And it was sort of, no, you need a new partner. And some surgery was being done on the NHS, and thankfully that has stopped now, because again, I think there's this we need to know what it looks like. We need to
exactly
with it.
Exactly. Lie on the bed, get a mirror, get a light.
You can stand over the loo,
hold a mirror underneath, but to take a look and know what your normal is. And that's hugely helpful. I mean, I've really suffered a lot with vaginal atrophy, dryness. I'm 14 years into a perimenopause journey. So I was 36 when I first started. I'm pretty sure, I'm 50 now. I'm pretty sure I'm probably menopausal now. But the reality is that has really changed for me. Walking, which I absolutely love. So, the counter to stress is to go for a walk. But if you can't, because it's absolutely burning and so distracting, feels like a urinary tract infection. We need to understand the parts of it. We need to not say it in hushed tones. We need to call it what it is. so that when we talk to a doctor, you know, the embarrassment needs to go, the, you know, the stigma around that, whether you're talking to a male doctor. I mean, I just find it, you know, it is something that men also struggle with. You know, it's not their part of their anatomy, I understand that, but we don't always have access to a female GP. But
no, this bugs me as well, because again, it's this, and I think it's sort of, this has to be taught across the board to all medical students. I mean, it's not just GPs, is it? It's to everyone that works in medicine, because it filters into again, if somebody came into me with a erectile dysfunction problem, not in a million years would I. So I mean, I did, because I'd sort of say, would you prefer to see a male GP? And they'd always go, no, you'll do. Yeah. Because there wasn't that shame around it.
No, because you're not addressing it in that way, like, I haven't got confidence, or it's a problem, or just did it like it's any other medical condition.
Again, because a lot of people, they posted a survey that they'd done at Manchester Royal Infirmary about being able to name the correct parts of the anatomy. And it's not surprising that there are a huge percentage of people, both male and female, that couldn't name the sort of where the clitoris is, where the urethra was. So if there's a website called mymenopausalvagina.co.uk, and on the downloads, there's a picture with the anatomy. So it means that if you are talking to your medic or practice nurse, you know which bit you're talking about.
Brilliant. I'm going to put that in the show notes, Zoe. That is so helpful, because your confidence goes up a notch when you feel like, okay, I've got my notes, I know what I'm talking about, or I've taken a picture, something like that. You know, I'm constantly taking photos of various things, because I think that a picture can speak 1,000 words and can help explain. But, you know, it's really important that you do whatever you need to do to feel that you can have that confidence in that window that you get with your GP, and ask for a double appointment as well. If you feel that you've got that there's something big and you can explain yourself to the receptionist, you know, you go a long way to securing that double appointment. But so sadly gonna have to bring our interview to a close, but when we think about what you want, what are your aspirations? You know, you've got children, what are your aspirations for boys, women, girls, whatever you identify with? When we think about the topic of menopause, what are your aspirations or hopes in the next 5 years? What would you like to see?
I think it's starting already, isn't it? It's brilliant. There is change. And I think, again, I mean, it's so unfair that it's not a mandatory part of the curriculum. It's so unfair to GPs to have never been taught about this. So that is absolutely crucial part. This starts, and again, so lots of them are taking up the confidence in menopause course. They're starting to learn about this, but this should have started at medical school and been taught over and over again. Because again, what happens is, yes, you might know the bare basics then, but with every other situation, so say diabetes care, you learn the bare basics, and then you learn how to adapt regimes that people might need a little bit more treatment than is in the book. They might need slightly different treatments. They might need this lifestyle measure. And you learn and you adapt, and you can speak to everyone else in your practice because you've all had the same training. And then you come to menopause care, and you probably find that there's one designated, usually female doctor, that's been designated the menopause doctor for that practice. No one to bounce cases off, started to learn, but doesn't have that familiarity because they haven't been doing it for years and years, about what to do if things don't go quite according to plan. So this has to be standardized. And in my view, it should be all GPs, all medical students should at least have the bare basics with this. I think, again, there's some brilliant people, because we know, so for example, Black Women in Menopause and Karen Arthur, there's lots of people, because the representation, it still is very much a white voice. There's sort of non-binary and transmasculine, and there's Tanya Glide with the queer menopause. But again, it's just opening up the conversation. And I think if we're going down looking at the hormones, it's looking at, well, what hormone is useful at this time for this person, rather than going HRT, no HRT. It's looking at all of the other things, because I think a lot of people that don't want HRT or can't have it are feeling very excluded at the moment. And it's sort of, there are so many lifestyle things that you can do to help with this and to improve bone density and improve cardiovascular health. So it's just to, again, that every single person going through this has access to evidence-based information. We need tons more research on this, access to treatment, and access to knowledge.
Hooray to all of those things, because that's a
common way to go.
It's a common sense approach. It is a long way to go, but what I always say in coaching, look how far we've come.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing that's got to keep the fire burning for us. Look how far we've come. And like I say,
and I think it's definitely out there now, isn't it, as a topic?
It is, and it will be tomorrow as well, you know, Monday evening, Channel 4, 9 p.m. Zoe's taken part in that documentary, and quite rightly so, because your passion, passion is often an overused word, but you know, you can detect sincere passion, and I think you have that in absolute abundance. And you know, doing the work that you do, you're an inspiration, you're a breath of fresh air, and I think you do change that stereotype. We don't need to put our suits on to go to see our GP, and I know that the openness with which you've talked about today will inspire people to think, yeah, okay, I'm going to go and start the conversation, because I know there are more GPs like you, Zoe, who are interested, even if they're male, probably because their wife or partner is going through this. There is a sensitivity to it that is creeping in. It shouldn't have to be that way, but in the meantime, let's ask those questions. Let's create that interest. Do you know anyone, doctor, that you know, a woman who, and it'd probably be a receptionist, I would imagine, or another nursing colleague or another doctor in the practice. You know, why don't we have a clinic? You know, that's certainly one of the things I'm writing to my practice manager about, which is actually
it's not funded though. So this is the other problem. So again, provide diabetes care, it's funded. To provide mental health care, it's funded. To provide the flu jabs, it's funded. To provide menopause care, it's not funded. And you can't do it in a 10-minute consultation. So it's another huge area that if you're going to ask, because it takes a significant chunk of time to do it properly, then it should be recognised and funded.
Well, that's why I'm going into my surgery to offer to do a free session.
Fabulous.
Because you know, there's many ways round. You don't always have to go through the front door. There are windows and back doors. So that's what I'm going to say. But
I think as well, for people that again, because a lot of, I mean, it's quite a tight curriculum, but it's almost trying to find your local GP trainee or medical student group and offer to give an expert patient session, because I think, again, listening to that woman's story about her lichen sclerosis on Friday, it's so powerful compared to a lecture from a book. And yes, obviously you need the lectures from books, but it's to have somebody standing there saying, this is how it affected me. I think that really does sort of trigger a lot of medics to go off and start learning.
Yes, because you demedicalize it, don't you, almost, by talking about the impact. And lichen sclerosis, do you want to give a quick definition of what lichen sclerosis is?
Yeah, so this is, so she had, I'll give a quick overview of her journey. So she had started to experience, if she said it felt like little paper cuts. So it's a chronic condition that again, it has to be managed. And so very often it's quite insidious. You can get sort of quite stretched white patches. So she had these sort of feeling like a paper cut. She said every time she went for pee, it was just really burning, and it took quite a long time for her to get diagnosed. So she was sort of examined and told, well, I can't see anything, doesn't look like there's anything there. And she ended up, I think, so it was confirmed with a biopsy, and then she ended up seeing a dermatologist who she said was just incredible, with just the different creams to manage it. And then she has a checkup, because it can, again, often if it's not managed or not detected for years and years and years, can become precancerous. But she said she came back with this diagnosis and a couple of leaflets, and then just thought, I don't know anybody else with this. I don't know who to talk to about this. I don't know where to go with this. And again, there are support groups now. So this is why she had come and spoken about this, and she has spoken to medical students about this, because it had a huge impact. And there were some brilliant sort of photos saying how it had impacted their lives. And then again, her because she'd had vaginal atrophy as well, it had made so penetrative sex had been incredibly uncomfortable. Things to very strong. Oh.
Sorry, it just froze for a minute there, Zoe. It just froze for a minute there. But yes, you were saying, so it just, I mean, other complications. Yeah,
but I think it was that thing of it's not hugely common, but it was just such a powerful, you could actually visualize how that had affected her, which is very different to reading about it in the book.
So exactly, it's painting pictures for people. It's turning it into actually the consequences of this condition. And lichen sclerosis obviously can be quite more prominent, if I'm correct, in people that have had either a surgical menopause, depleted estrogen, because the structure of those tissues completely changes, doesn't it? And then it becomes open to these infections that just take.
I think they think it's on a. So there's again, there's quite a lot of research going on at the MRI at the moment to see how the sort of tissue progresses. But another one, this is another reason why I need to, because I say it can look quite tight and quite pale in areas. So it's another reason to start looking at your vulva.
Exactly, and not to pass things off. And you know how it feels for you, and be confident in that. Be confident in knowing how good feels for you, and then when it doesn't feel good, and be determined. It may take more than one visit. I'm on my third or fourth visit. I'm fine with that, because I know what good looks like for me, and I've got the right people around me. But you know what? Be the architect for your own health. Be the architect of your menopause transition, and be bold and be confident. Be sassy about it. You're not being difficult. We speak with respect to the professionals that are helping us, but be determined. I think that's the most important thing. And have someone come with you. If you're not feeling that strong, have a chaperone come with you and take someone in for moral support, because that's really good too.
And I think there's so many books out now, aren't there? And so audio material, and there's a lot of learning resources out there to really.
Definitely. Well, Zoe, thank you so much. It only leaves me to say thank you to you, but how can people know more about you? Where can they get more of Zoe, Dr. Zoe, on social media?
I tend to just hang out on Instagram under Manchester Menopause Hive, and it's not particularly structured. It's just what happens to come into my head on that day.
It's absolutely brilliant. It's like gold, and it's the little bee symbol. You'll see it. So I'll put that link as well. Yes. Manchester Menopause Hive. Well, I know you're going to be inundated tomorrow on Tuesday and the rest of the week. So boy, do I feel privileged to have had the chance to speak to you before. And I really have enjoyed speaking to you, Zoe. I hope we get to speak again. Yes. Thank you for your time now, and I hope you have a lovely. What are you doing for the rest of the bank holiday?
I think it's going to be tackling the garden, and then I need to start, because I accidentally deleted my. I only had a little collection of PowerPoints. I accidentally deleted them. There was a bot thing on my computer, so I panicked and set it back to factory settings. I'm not very good with it.
Ouch.
So they need to, so I need to start.
Yes, okay. Well, it's a rainy day here in Devon.
And some knitting.
Yeah, and some knitting. Well, it's a rainy day here in Devon, so I'm gonna do a little bit of getting stuff ready for the garden, and a bit of baking. I always find that I really love baking. Yeah. It's quite spiritual, it's quite soulful. So we'll have a lovely weekend and have a great week. Care. Thanks so much.
Catch up.